Hi, I'm Nicole Bucala, the General Manager of DataBee by Comcast Technology Solutions. We're very excited to be exhibiting at RSA Conference 2024, and right now I'm very pleased to be joined by two of the industry's leading CISOs of critical infrastructure, Noopur Davis, Comcast Corporation Global CISO, and Jesse Whaley, CISO of Amtrak. Welcome and thanks for being here.
It's so good to be here.
I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, Jesse, DataBee first met you last August of 2023 at Black Hat, and we were surprised to learn that Amtrak is more than just trains. Can you tell us a little bit more about the diverse company that it is and what you're responsible for protecting?
Sure, glad to. So Amtrak is a passenger railroad. We are a transportation company. We do get people from point A to point B, from city center to city center. But there's a lot of infrastructure and a lot of operations that go behind being able to do all of that across the United States. Besides being in the transportation sector, we also generate our own power for our operations on the Northeast Corridor. That's Washington, D.C. to Boston. And then we actually provide some of that power to some of our partners along the way. Amtrak has a sizable real estate operation. There's 568 stations, maintenance facilities, office buildings, bridges, tunnels, all kinds of infrastructure. And I think another big part of our business is we are a construction company where we're building bridges and tunnels and infrastructure all over the country to expand our operations.
Wow, that's incredible. I heard transportation, operations, real estate, utilities generating electricity, retail. I mean, that's just incredible to think about. Noopur, it's similar for you, isn't it? Because Comcast is a household name and people think of it as TV and Wi-Fi, but it's so much more, isn't it?
It really is. It's a tremendously diversified set of businesses. You know, there's the classic voice, video, broadband. Then there is NBC Universal, Parks, the news studios, there's Sky in Europe, there's an advertising business. It's extremely complicated. And I think there's like memes about, oh, I did not know Comcast owned this, right? So just like yours, by the way, the power station bit, that is like mind-blowing that you own your own power generation. But, Comcast is that way as well. You know, we have a network that we run, which is, about 50% of US broadband traffic flows through that network. So we have, 500,000 network devices to secure. These are the routers and switches. And we have 1,000 retail stores, where we sell everything from phones to boxes. We have 100 million devices around the world with RDK, which is our open source operating system for real-time devices. And so we secure those. So, by the time you kind of put that tremendous infrastructure together, it's extremely complicated. And yes, you have to worry about the power, the supply chain, the custom chips that go into these devices. Complexity is what we do.
That's just incredible. I'm really excited because tomorrow at Dave DeWalt's Night Dragon Summit, we're going to see both of you on the critical infrastructure panel.
Yes.
That'll be great.
So
would be great.
Tell us a little bit more, just a little sneak peek into some of what the issues are for a CISO of a critical infrastructure company today. Jesse, can you kick us off?
Sure. I think some of the biggest challenges is just, and Noopur already said it, with the complexity, but the scale. The scale of which, kind of our companies operates. Comcast, obviously, slightly larger than Amtrak, but, we have the physical presence we have across the United States with the infrastructure itself. And all of the assets that go behind, making trains run, that's a substantial amount of assets. And being able to track all of those assets is quite complicated as well. So if you think Amtrak is now 53 years old, we have assets that are 53 years old. We have assets that are 1 year old. In fact, our oldest asset is from like the Civil War era. That's the tunnel just north of Baltimore. And getting a handle on all of these assets and understanding like what has security or cybersecurity implications, where we have vulnerabilities and exposures across the infrastructure, and being able to manage all of that is quite a task.
Wow.
And you have a special concern, which is safety,
Yes.
right? So safety and security are really hand in hand with what you do.
They are. Safety is a big part of Amtrak's operations. In fact, when I started at Amtrak, it was really hard to kind of bring forward like a culture of cybersecurity because it didn't exist before. The company didn't know what it is or why it's important to them. But everyone in the company understood safety and the importance of that. And especially at the time that we're in now, there's a lot of innovation going on in transportation. Specifically because a lot of the older infrastructure and assets that are out there they're primarily analog, but as those older equipment is failing, they're being replaced with digital assets. And so there's this huge transformation going on where we have to be ready to live in a world where there's both analog and digital, and implications in the physical world that can impact the digital, and implications in the digital world that can impact physical things like safety.
Oh, that's, not to that extent, but the same thing here, right? Because the network is still, ultimately it's analog to digital too, right? So it is still a lot of non-digital assets, but the transformation is tremendous. And that is what is generating the data, as you move from more analog assets to more digital assets. We had something called, which I didn't know before I joined Comcast 8.5 years ago, something called a CMTS, a cable modem termination system. It used to be, pretty analogish. And Comcast has, pioneered virtual CMTSs. And the virtual CMTS now generates, a ton more data than the physical ones ever did, right? So that is, the joy of the transformation, and then also the challenge. Yeah.
Of course.
So, if you're running a critical infrastructure company and you're protecting a critical infrastructure company, I imagine one of the things that you have to think a lot more about is the regulatory demands, the compliance demands. I mean, we think of 3 things that happened just in the past 12 months. We think of, the new SEC breach notification requirement that impacts us. We think about the PCI DSS 4.0 regulation, which has emerged. And we all saw the news on the former SolarWinds CISO and, how the SEC stepped in there. And so, talk to me a little bit about, from your perspective, whether it's these regulations or another, what are some of the biggest compliance challenges, that you have today? Maybe Jesse, we'll start with you on that one.
Sure. So Amtrak is kind of in a regulated industry, and I didn't share this earlier when I shared kind of the background of Amtrak, but Amtrak is a for-profit corporation. However, it is owned by the government. So while we can operate separately from the government, that means that we're heavily regulated primarily around the operations and safety of trains. That's through the Federal Railroad Administration and the Department of Transportation. And then, being a critical infrastructure owner and operator, that falls under DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and specifically the Transportation Security Administration for the transportation sector. So that's primarily where a lot of our regulation is coming from, those entities. And so over the last nearly 3 years now, we've had the TSA issue a number of different security directives on to see how we are doing and how we are securing the infrastructure that the nation depends on. But that's not even as challenging as some of the other areas. Some of the other areas seemed like it would be easier, but perhaps one of our most challenging areas is the PCI, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards, which we have to go through an assessment every year and get a report card that says we're compliant. And it seems like every year the Standards Council keeps raising the bar on what we need to do. So with PCI version 4, the big challenge is, well, now we have to do this continuous compliance thing. Well, how do we know, that we're compliant at any given point in time? So a lot of the challenges I have around compliance is trying to, answer a lot of those questions around PCI and be able to answer those questions continuously, which is, part of the first conversation that we had.
Yes, totally. Same for us. There is a lot of regulation, a lot of new regulation. It's not just because Comcast is global, it's also the European regulations like for Sky and others. And because Comcast has a lot of consumer data, there's also a lot of privacy regulations. So, one of the ways that we think about it, and Jesse, you and I have talked about this in the past, is, you can just spend your entire existence in just, taking care of the compliance issues. But, ultimately compliance issues don't make you secure, right? Compliance is a measurement of how secure you are, but you really need to focus on other things as well. So a good way of doing this, and this is, again, we have always, whenever I say, how something is working for us, I always say, but we have a long way to go, because we do. But, one way to get around it is to go, here are some core things that we're going to measure. And, we'll have a data structure around that and a data play around that. And then once we measure those core things, they will actually satisfy a bunch of regulations. So, you come up with your core base controls, you come up with how do they map to all of those regulations. Oh, here's a regulation, here's a particular thing, I don't have a control for it or a measure for it, let me just put that in. But once I've done that, then all I need to worry about is that base, and then you kind of just become compliant just by mapping to the. So that approach has really helped us come a long way. So we have this giant spreadsheet that maps, but underneath it's the same common level set of controls, data.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That's fascinating, because what you're essentially saying is you're making security a trackable metric, right?
Yes, or at least compliance a trackable
metric. And
right.
Jesse, what I'm hearing you say, is when it comes to the questions that regulators are asking, you need to be able to accurately answer those questions, perhaps even provide evidence. And the evidence is only as good as the data you have. So that brings me perhaps to my next question. I know you're familiar with the security risk and compliance data fabric that Noopur built in-house that's been operating at Comcast. And we know you're familiar with DataBee, which is the commercial version of that. So talk to us a little bit about, what's your vision for the next 2 to 3 years for Amtrak when it comes to your security data estate, and how you plan to mature that and get really great insights out of all that connected data?
Sure, that's a great question. And I think I'll start with, what's the real challenge that I'm trying to solve here, and the challenge is cybersecurity to begin with, but then how do we answer for cybersecurity questions, and how do we answer compliance questions that we get asked continuously, and how do we show that we've achieved compliance and continue to be compliant on certain things. And the fundamental answer is the same for all of those. The answer is in the data. And today, today we're going through some evolution right now, but even today and prior to it, a lot of those answers require somebody on my team to go chase down somebody on another team, and it may take up to 2 weeks to get an answer for something that lives in the data somewhere. And so my vision here is that if we could just come up with all the questions that need answers, and then figure out what data has those answers, and map that data to the answers, let's say in a dashboard or some sort of portal, so that both me and my team or anyone in the company could have answers to those questions at any time in real time. So that's kind of the vision of where we want to go with leveraging data to answer cybersecurity and compliance questions.
I love that. It's super inspirational. It's almost like a shift left for security. It's before you start running cool AI/ML algorithms or getting excited about the colors on a dashboard. It's, do I have the right data? Is it complete? Is it valid? Does everyone agree? And can the right people access it? So it's going to be revolutionary. Now, Noopur, You've had the security risk and compliance data fabric operating for at least 4 years at Comcast. The results have been just tremendous when it comes to not only the security benefits, but the cost savings and the operational efficiencies. So you're kind of in that very mature state. So tell us a little bit more. What do your next 2 to 3 years look like as you kind of expand on your own data fabric?
Yeah. So, one of the set of new controls that we're bringing into the continuous controls is the privacy set of controls. Because, the same issues that we struggle with, the regulatory and the visibility. I'm just going to riff for a minute on visibility, because making something visible that everybody agrees that, yes, I'm looking at the same thing, and I agree that I'm looking at the same thing, is half the battle. Because most people want to do the right thing. And when they see that, okay, they own something that they're responsible for and it is not in compliance, they will do the right thing. So with security, we've come a long way, still have a long way to go. For privacy, we're doing the same now. So using the same data fabric now for privacy controls, like what are my high-risk privacy data stores? Do I have them onboarded to my system? Have I done a risk analysis? Have I done minimization? Right, like there are like about a dozen controls now on around privacy. The other part that is super exciting is, because you have the data, you can now start taking advantage of some of the real innovations that are happening in the large language models, the generative AI space, because cyber is also a very, very people intensive. A typical scenario is, oh, I noticed something wrong, but I need to talk to that person to really figure out if it is. And that bit of talking can take so much effort and time. And that is where these models become really, really useful, because they can actually do that talking for you. So in a way, the cyber use of LLM is opposite to the general chatbot use, where a person initiates the conversation, right? Like you go in and say, what city should I visit in Germany? I don't know. Here, the bot reaches out to the person and says, hey, I noticed XYZ. Can you please respond to me about this, right? And that is super revolutionary. We're just starting to do some POCs on that, but I'm really excited.
That is so cool.
It really is. I mean, it takes that grunt work and that, send an email, call, they're not there, reach out, they're not there. When they respond, you're not there. It takes that whole thing out of the system, but we'll see.
That's incredible. Well, and that brings us to my next question. So, I think we're all getting about 25 emails a day from some AI company, right? Let me sell you this AI product. And generative AI is the new buzzword. I haven't yet been to the RSA show floor, but I'm sure that AI is going to be all over the marketing this year. We also know that AI is only as good as the data that it runs on, right? It's kind of a garbage in, garbage out sort of thing. So tell me a little bit about how each of your companies are thinking about leveraging AI from a security perspective over the next couple of years. And I know you're at different stages too, so.
Yeah, well, I think there's different types of AI to begin with. Like, I think the more traditional AI has a lot more practical use cases in the transportation industry, like being able to predict when a train needs to go into maintenance, or some infrastructure is having some issues that need to have an inspection and to make sure that everything's safe. And what I find interesting about going back to the data piece of AI, in the traditional AI sense, when, let's say, anomalies are detected in infrastructure, those anomalies are detected via data. Now, the data doesn't know like what caused the anomaly per se. So like an anomaly could be caused by an equipment failure, right? Or it could be caused by a threat actor, right? I see there being some partnerships there from both, like, let's say, the maintenance and mechanical side of things with, security and cybersecurity to figure out how we can both leverage some of the same data to figure out, well, what's causing the problem. So that's one area where I think we'll see some partnerships, some heavy partnerships in critical infrastructure, and then I think there are others areas that are going to start forming around more predictive analytics. Like, okay, this is what we've seen happen in the past when these things happened. We think that this event is likely to happen in the near future if these trends continue. So being able to leverage AI as like an early warning or indicator of things about to go wrong, and then be able to that's where you can have humans intervene to act before something actually goes wrong, whether it's a equipment failure or whether it's a threat actor targeting your company. Those are the areas where I'm most excited to see movement, and I'm really excited about the partnership between both the operations of the business and the security of the operations.
And that's similar to what you were sharing, Noopur, with the generative AI chatbot that your team is building, right? It's within the security organization to yield incredible operational efficiencies.
Absolutely. Right? If again, still in the POC state, but yes, the promise is incredible. But that predictive use case is another use case that is actually working for Comcast, because one of I talked about our 1,000 retail stores. Mm-hmm. The Wi-Fi in those retail stores is critical, because all of the kind of business is conducted on those Wi-Fis. And so my team is responsible for the security of the stores, and the security gear and Wi-Fi gear happens to be the same gear, right? So every time a Wi-Fi issue happens, they call the security team. It's like, so we started going, oh, this is ridiculous. So we started looking at what are the early indicators that when we see them, we can start predicting. And again, using the data fabric, we built models that can start predicting that if we see, this particular thing flap this many times, that we know 2 or 3 days later, there's going to be an outage. So we got to be, the first time we called the field and said, can you go to the store and fix this equipment because it's going to go out in 3 days? They were like, you're crazy. They didn't send somebody in. But today they actually listen to us. We just send a report every day saying these 3 things are going to be in trouble. They actually dispatch technicians and go fix them before the thing actually goes wrong.
Well, that's amazing.
So that's pretty cool. Yeah. That took some cultural change, by the way, because they don't usually they respond to an actual event. They don't respond to a predicted event. Right?
It sounds like having the right data on hand and the right underlying infrastructure, though, enables you to gain those operational efficiencies and drive the cultural change so much faster.
Absolutely.
Because people see the results.
Absolutely.
So cool.
And it's a small case, it's 1,000 stores. But for Comcast, those 1,000 stores there's a lot of business that happens through, people still come into the stores to pay their bills. And so it's super important, even though not at a huge scale. But yeah.
And I would imagine like the customer impact to one store,
yes,
having the Wi-Fi going down and disrupting those operations.
Absolutely.
And then you got disgruntled customers that aren't happy they have to wait or come back tomorrow.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so it's a huge lot of noise taken out of the system.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I hope that we're back here together in 5 years. And if we are, what do you think the industry is going to be talking about at RSA Conference 2029? What do each of you think?
Well, I'll start with, I think there's going to be a lot more around how people are using data to solve cybersecurity challenges. I think data solutions are going to displace things like your SIM and different types of security analytics platforms that exist today. I think the data engine is going to kind of reach a peak of this is the direction that we're going as an industry to do our cybersecurity monitoring or observability, detection, response compliance work. I think we're going to see a very data-centric RSA show, if not before, by 29.
Do you think that's going to lead to consolidation? This focus. I mean, because you go to the show floor now, there's thousands of vendors, right, with platforms and point solutions. And back to your comment earlier, much of a CISO's organization every day focuses on answering questions for the CISO and other executives, right? And there's so many solutions on the floor that aim to answer just one or two questions. So what do you think that's going to look like?
I think there's always the potential for consolidation, merger, acquisition of solutions. The best of breed point solution versus the platform play. I think we'll continue to see a pendulum of point solutions, the platform solutions, and I've been a champion on both sides of those, right? Depending on kind of where I'm at, and a lot of like I think decision on do you go with a platform solution or you go with a point solution is really dependent on the organization and the organization's maturity and what challenges that they're facing. But certainly, I do see there being some additional convergence around data security platforms.
Makes sense. Noopur, what about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's in 5 years, I think there will be more platforms. Hopefully not, hopefully we won't go from 1 million point solutions to 1 million platforms. But, and I think there is always this need for, I'm in awe when I go on the floor and see all of the scrappy, the innovation that is happening in those point solutions. So I think we always need those, but they need to fit into that larger platform play. But I think 5 years, we'll be talking about data. We'll be talking about AI, especially generative AI. And I think we'll be talking about quantum much more than we are now. So
that's going to be very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, with that cliffhanger, thank you so much to both of you for making the time to be here. These CISO connections are so valuable where we get to really share and learn from each other.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great conversation.
With that, thank you so much for tuning in. If you are interested in learning more about security data fabrics and security data maturity, we encourage you to check out our website, databee.buzz.